for you at downtown Manhattan right now, and a U.S. official says the United States is currently engaged in an extensive effort to counter Chinese influence operations here and overseas. One day after the FBI busted two men accused of operating a secret Chinese police station in New York. There are multiple reports that there's another police station, secret police station in New York City, as well as other locations including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Nebraska, and Minnesota. And now we're also learning some more about the suspects. The Daily Caller reports that one of them, Lu Wang, was pictured recently meeting with several prominent New York Democrats at swanky dinners and campaign events, and you can see him in some of the pictures with New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. He even attended an apparent fundraiser for New York Democratic Congresswoman Grace Meng. Now, public records show that Lu personally donated $4,000 to Adams' mayoral campaign under the adopted name of James Liu. That occurred between 2019 and 2021. Now, Liu allegedly operated that overseas police station on behalf of the Chinese government, pressuring Chinese dissidents here in this country. And joining us now to talk more about this, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Also with us, retired Air Force Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and the author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War, Gordon Chang. Gentlemen, great to have you all here.
Good to see you. Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, Gordon, whether it's Hunter Biden and his 10% stake in that CCP-backed firm BHR Partners or Eric Swalwell and Fang Fang, it does seem like the CCP's got a thing for Democrats.
Yes, and it also has a thing for Republicans and independents. I mean, it is all Americans. And its contacts with the United States are pervasive, and they use those contacts to take down our society. So really what we have is an existential threat to the U.S., and what makes this worse is that the Biden administration knows what's going on, but is not defending us. Remember, it closed this police station only after a Spanish NGO talked about this. And as we know, there are 6 more police stations in the U.S. The FBI is not moving against them. So it's only public pressure that is forcing the Biden administration to do what it is constitutionally required to do, which is to protect the United States from foreign attack.
Now, Tony, here's an example of how these secret police organizations work. They track Chinese citizens here in this country. There was a story a couple of years ago about a Chinese foreign exchange student who was attending the University of Minnesota. And while he was here in this country, he was sharing memes about President Xi, comparing him to Winnie the Pooh, which is against the law in China. Now, when that student returned to China, he was tracked down and put in prison for 6 months. They are trying not only to stifle speech in their own country, but they're also doing it here as well.
Well, they don't see any need for free speech, John, because according to them, those people, their citizens, no matter where they are subject to the Chinese way of doing business. In this point, the Chinese are much more totalitarian than they are communistic. I mean, they are communist by system, but they now live in a fascist system where if you say or do anything against the ruling party, you're going to be punished. And John, this is not new. I mean, look, the Chinese have sent their kids here, that they were called cadre kids, throughout the last 40 years to educate themselves to understand our system. And they've imbued themselves, their people, in our system, not only in these police stations, but also in, believe it or not, Chinese restaurants. So the United States allowed a pervasive surveillance system of Chinese intelligence to establish itself here to help them track their citizens. It's a very dangerous thing. It's something we need to counter.
Yeah, and we also got to talk about these Confucius Institutes. General Holt, Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona was asked about this and the infiltration of these Confucius Institutes on college campuses at a hearing yesterday. And here's what he said, quote, "I don't have any information around specific efforts to try and influence U.S. education." He was asked specifically about the Confucius Institutes, and he said, quote, "Again, I don't have any information on the Confucius Institutes now, but I'm sure my team may be aware of it and look into that." Now, all you have to do is Google Confucius Institutes, and you can learn. There's a Politico article from 2018 talking about, quote unquote, how the CCP infiltrated U.S. college campuses.
Yeah, how have they infiltrated every single walk of life? This is the Chinese way of warfare. They have been at war with us. Their manifesto, Unrestricted Warfare, which came out in 1999, and all of us young officers at the time read and were terrified of, because it's like we were all, oh, this will work, because they're pervading every part of our society. And they have this group called the United Front that works things like the Confucius Institute. on all our campuses. And when they do that, they're essentially Chinese intelligence and indoctrination centers. And the money that flows behind them, John, is what enables them. And when we hear nonsense testimony from the Secretary of Education, we can know that there are certainly elements, if not the whole administration, that's compromised by China, which, by the way, is also part of their playbook.
A lot of the research that goes on at United States universities gets sent directly over to China. General, sticking with you here, let's talk about this. Jack Teixeira, the judge postponing his hearing today. He's the 21-year-old Air National Guardsman accused of leaking these classified materials. Now, you think this whole situation sounds very suspicious because the DOJ has been brought in to investigate, because, aside from the fact that every branch of the military has its own investigation team, very qualified investigators. You say it's just weird. Why do you think they are handling this investigation in this fashion?
Yeah, there's no reason for it. The DOD should not be in the business of asking anyone to come in and investigate what is, unfortunately, a routine event. Somebody compromised national security with a release of intelligence. It does look on its surface that the airman was not involved in anything malicious per se, but there are reasons and ways that airman followed breadcrumbs electronically to get to that information. Who was involved? Who encouraged that airman to get there? Is the government super embarrassed about how it got that airman outed? And how did the news agencies get ahead of everything, being on scene when this airman was collared? Why is it that we're told a 16-year-old who fingered this airman speaks perfect master's level English, doesn't sound like a 16-year-old? And I think that the reason we're going to keep seeing postponements and less of this in the public eye is because I suspect the government knows more about how this came about. And then the uneven standard of all these other people who have compromised intelligence haven't faced an ounce of accountability whatsoever.
Well, yes, and just to be clear, his attorneys also asked for this delay, but it sounds, like we probably will not hear as much about this moving forward. Real quickly, you got 1 minute left to Tony and to Gordon. We recently saw Vladimir Putin resurface. He is in apparently Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. And Tony, this is another middle finger to the Biden administration.
Of course, look, Biden has showed weakness, and Putin is going to basically thumb his nose in Biden's face every step of the way. Gordon talked about the other day about how weakness is what prompted Putin to act. It's what's going to prompt China to act, something that Putin reminds us of every day. And I hope Biden pays attention because he's got to wake up. Gordon, last word to you.
I think this is one of the most dangerous times where our adversaries and our enemies believe that they can do things that would be inconceivable, a few years ago. So this is a point where we really have to start getting serious about defending ourselves. The Biden administration is not that serious.
Gentlemen, great to see you all. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and Gordon Chang. Thank you again, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.